You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear.
Hey everybody, it's Andy Polk, your host for today. Thanks for joining us on the latest edition of Shoe and Show. 2024 is off to an interesting start in terms of politics, society, economy is surprising many of us, the resiliency and the continued growth of it. But in the footwear industry, when we look at retail sales over the first quarter, it's a little flat. So it's got a lot of companies concerned. It's got a lot of companies who are looking at costs and being a little cautious in how they approach 2024. And we thought it'd be really interesting to take a look at some of the brands that are out there that are succeeding in the marketplace, in particular, why that may be. So I'm happy today to have on guests from L.E.K Consulting. So we've got John Weber and Laura Brookhiser. John and Laura, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Andy. Great to be here.
Absolutely. First of all, John, I'll start with you. L.E.K Consulting. Some people may know you, some people may not, but if you can just give us the elevator understanding of L.E.K and how you guys serve the footwear market.
Sure. Appreciate that, Andy. And again, really a pleasure to be with you today and talk about our brand heat results. Yeah, for those of you that may not be familiar, L.E.K Consulting, we're a global management consulting firm. We just celebrated our 40th year in business last year. We're very proud of that.
Congrats.
Yeah, we've got over 20 offices around the world. And we really focus on growth strategy. So we're really growth specialists. And that could really mean anything from macro strategic planning, making strategic choices around strategic plan development, as well as things such as brand position, consumer insights. We do a lot of work in channel strategy and digital strategy. We also help companies grow internationally. M&A advisory is also a piece of what we do. And in a nutshell, that's what we cover. And you can imagine a lot of the work that we do is underpinned by deep consumer insights, market research, and data analytics. And so we've got a keen interest in understanding the consumer and which brands they're associating with. And so obviously that's a reason why we're here today.
Awesome. And Laura, I'll bring you in too, because I think several people in the industry have seen this before, and this is not new. I think it's maybe the third year of you guys doing this, but you do a brand heat index for footwear companies. So maybe you can tell us the overview of what this report is, and then the overview of how you guys put it together and what it tells us.
Right. This is L.E.K's third year publishing the Brand Heat Index. We developed it really as a means to understand which brands in both footwear and apparel were gaining popularity with consumers. There are a number of other brand measures out there, but a lot of them are based on just sheer size and scale of those businesses. And we wanted a way to understand where emerging brands were coming out on top and gaining heat with consumers. I think from years of doing our strategy work with clients, of course, you need to have differentiation in your product and a clear value proposition to the consumer, but really getting that brand heat and an affinity with the consumer base that wants to associate themselves with your brand and feel an emotional connection to it above and beyond the product is really key to success. So we have a range of questions that we ask consumers about which brands they see gaining and declining in popularity among their peers. And that informs the basis of the brand heat score, which we assign to each brand on a scale of 0 to 100. You mentioned footwear and apparel. We do this across 4 subcategories. So outdoor, athletic, casual, and dress. And we test over 400 or 500 brands with a population of 4,000 different consumers. So we're able to segment those results then by category, gender, and generation, which I think gives some real nuance into the insights beyond just a brand heat rating.
Awesome. 4,000 people across the country, you're asking questions about their choices and about maybe what's cool, what's hot in their households, what's hot with their friends, and you create this report. What are some of the kind of key takeaways that you guys saw in this latest report, kind of top line takeaways?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things. And one we might start with is really that there's a lot of heat in the athletic and outdoor spaces in general. So when you actually look at the brands that are getting the sort of highest popularity trajectory ratings across categories, there's a lot of high scores and affinity for those outdoor athletic brands. Of course, it's no surprise to folks that Nike is a popular brand across generations and genders, but similar excitement around a range of the emerging brands in those spaces as well. And I think this speaks to one of the broader trends that we're seeing, which is that consumers are really wearing those athletic and outdoor brands for a broader array of occasions. It isn't just for a sport or for a particular activity. Those are now lifestyle brands as well, and that's a meaningful portion of their business. And they've been able to create brands that consumers want to badge and associate themselves with across wearing occasions, which I think is an exciting way for previously kind of activity-specific businesses to really think about growing and scaling.
Hmm. In the report too, though, you also look at fashion, you look at other segments with it as well, correct?
Correct. And so there, I think you'll see a bit, across categories, there's a decent amount of variance in the brand heat scores. And we really see that the handful of brands that are atop each of the lists have meaningfully higher heat scores than the brands that come in even at number 7, number 8, number 9. And you start to see true kind of bifurcation in the marketplace, I think. And you were mentioning some questions around the economy, but I think when people's pocketbooks may feel a little tighter, really being able to sit at the brand heat score is how you're going to drive differentials.
Great point. And I do think that the casualization of America continues, and we do see products being launched around being able to use a pair of shoes for the gym and then still go out to cocktails, happy hour, and it still be socially acceptable to go into a nice place with a semi running shoe. And actually, as we're covering this, Decker's brands just launched a brand new sneaker that kind of does exactly that, where it's a mix of athletic meets kind of fashion lifestyle type thing. And I think in the space, John, we keep seeing this where these emerging brands keep coming out. And if we had this conversation 10 years ago, I'd be really curious because you see somebody launch, they would be really hot for a minute. It'd be more of a fad, but some of these brands now have staying power and are challenging traditional brands. Maybe you can talk a little bit about some of those and how they're able to keep that staying power as they keep going up and keep growing sales.
Yeah, Andy, that's a real great point, and it's a great example. It's certainly one of the key themes that we started noticing as soon as we began doing this work a few years ago, and that's been holding true ever since. And so this concept of newcomer brands, so to speak, brands that have been around, let's say a decade, maybe 2 max, it's notable how significant they are within the top 10 lists. If you look across the different lists, whether that's gender, generation, product category, you're going to see newcomer brands. And if you were to go back, even before we would have done this work, and even just a few years ago, the prominence of Nike, obviously, and others you would expect at the top of those lists. But now you're seeing brands that emerged a few years ago. Let's take On Running, for example, really climbed quickly up the list. And this is the second year now that within women's athletic footwear specifically, they actually hold the top spot. And so that's pretty notable.
Yeah.
And not too far behind, you see in their category as well as others, Hoka is there. They're significant. If you look across in other areas such as athletic apparel, you're going to see Lululemon, you're going to see Aloe. If you start moving into casual, boy, Hey Dude really rocketed up the charts last year. Notably, Crocs has been a mainstay for a few years. Hey Dude holding on to that spot, largely speaking, this year. As you look more broadly, UGG, again, making stride, Carhartt within casual and rugged outdoor, also workwear generally is a theme. And you're not just seeing them come up the charts, but as you said, you used the term staying power. That's just a perfect phrase here, because when these brands have emerged and moved into these top 10s and even the top spots in some cases, that really signals a change in the competitive landscape. If you're a legacy brand or you're anybody competing, you've got to be aware of the fact that the marketplace and who consumers prefer is different today than it was not only last year, but it's certainly the way likely they've been operating. And maybe they created their strategic plan in a world that looks very different than it does today. And that's notable. Why is that happening? We get asked that a lot. And we can all look at the different types of brands and see some themes. Certainly they have clear brand position. They tend to be specialty brands. They have a clear story, messaging. They're not ultra premium, but they are typically better better product at the upper tier. And you see some also dynamics which are happening, we think, broadly. The consumer generally, Laura and I and our team, we do a lot of consumer research, and consumers' receptivity to new brands is higher than ever. When we do work around which brands do you consider for any given occasion, that list today is much larger than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So they want new brands, they want specialty brands, so they're open-minded. And these brands are using tactics beyond traditional measures. So they're moving beyond traditional wholesale and really driving DTC and within marketing, social media, and otherwise, they're true experts at it. And so that is the formula, and it creates the ecosystem, if you will, for them to thrive if they're doing.
Laura, I do want to speak a little bit about how you guys segment the generations and gender to get a deeper dive into that. Because I think obviously everybody nowadays has to find little niches that they have and focus a segment. And I'll never forget the first time I was doing a social media strategy session on marketing. The person was very specific. They said, if you're messaging the same way on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and you're saying the same thing, you're doing it wrong, right? So even that, to the different generations that may be on those platforms, as we talk about these kind of emerging brands being experts at social media and connection, maybe you can just share a little bit about the gender and the generational breakouts that you guys see.
That's a great question, Andy. So I think I'll touch on gender first and then maybe switch over to generation. But particularly on the footwear side, you do actually see a number of brands that have strength across both men and women. This is more, I would say, on the athletic and casual end of the spectrum, whether that is a Nike, a Crocs, a Hey Dude, Converse, or Vans. These businesses, while they may still have a slight skew in their actual sales data to one gender or the other, have been able to achieve broad appeal across both men and women. Once you get into dress footwear, for example, though, it's almost a completely different set of brands that the consumer thinks is hot across men and women. And so there, while Polk might be a leader among, they don't show up on the top 10 list for women. And so I think as you get into the more purely style and aesthetic driven wearing occasions, I think you start to see more dispersion in the brands that are hot among different consumer populations. From a generational perspective, there are some clear differences and actually some interesting sort of trend lines in terms of where brands move. So as you might expect when you look at kind of older generations, and we talk about it Gen X here, but that brands like Skechers or an L.E.K or an L.E.K on the apparel side are generally hotter among Gen X. While almost all consumers say that brand reputation and style are the most important drivers of brand heat, you do see that Gen X differentially cares about quality and comfort. And I think that's consistent with the brands that are over-indexing among Gen X. On the other hand, when you look at some of the brands that are uniquely popular among Gen Z, they either may have a more unique silhouette, something that's really on trend, but may not be accessible to an older consumer just yet. Or you also see a lot of brands, particularly on the apparel side, actually, that have been reaching this new consumer base through TikTok or other social media avenues. To your point, maybe wouldn't reach the Gen Xer in the same way. And so there we see, whether it's Gymshark, Cider, Princess Polly, a range of brands that have been actually able to really quickly penetrate that younger consumer through a social media driven strategy there.
Got it. So Gen X, flannel, grunge, still hot. Nothing's changed there. Thank God for Gen X, the forgotten generation, keeping it all together for all of us out there. So let me talk to you a little bit about more of the business strategy around that, because I think it is interesting that coming out of COVID, we had people who were locked in their houses, who were buying lots of things online. Their closet, I feel, got really full of clothing and product, and that really became the challenge for our industry. Was we had this kind of real challenge with supply chain getting product in. We brought way too much in, but some of it wasn't fresh. And I feel like some of the emerging brands where we see the success is around the product is driving a lot of that, of something just a little bit different that's out there. And we see more traditional companies taking a look at that and trying to figure out how they leverage their brand and launch new product. And that, from what we see, it's just it's a difficult space as a legacy, because you have that same mentality of this is the way we've done it. And all of a sudden you've got to shift to a very agile, quick way of looking at things. And I'm just wondering, when you guys talk to clients, is that what you're talking to them about in particular, about looking at their operations and making adjustments?
We definitely see those themes in our work, and newness is critical. Obviously, brand heat is at the top, as Laura had mentioned. When you think about what's really driving some of these brands, consumers have a lot of affinity because those brands are resonating and they're connecting in some shape or form. But newness is a part of that, right?
Okay.
Having new product, having a new story, a new perspective on the industry, new style, for example. So innovation, newness, disruption, whatever you want to call it at some level, does allow and enable brand heat. And through COVID, look, a lot of things were difficult from an operational perspective. We've seen a lot of companies, in fact, get out of whack, so to speak, whether it's their org structure, whether it's the functional capabilities that they had. Just look at the substantial step function changes in how the consumer was behaving around purchasing from traditional retail to DTC and e-commerce. Think about how now they're absorbing media and content today versus pre-COVID. That has impacts for the capabilities that companies need within their organizations to thrive and to connect, right? And to drive that brand heat. And so we do talk to our clients a lot around their capabilities, how they're going to market their operations that you'd mentioned. And it is product related, but that also does drive into brand heat. Function alone, another theme that we saw, we did ask consumers, what drives your rating of why this brand is popular or not? Across the board, brand and style are the clear leaders. So if we were to point clients to a couple key areas, it would be those, making sure that you really have that. Of course, functional dimensions like quality, comfort, even value, those are all important. Some will skew in some generations more so than others, but we need to get newness within our brand, within our product, and that's going to go a long way. And so I think that's probably pulled back a little bit because of COVID, because of the disruption. Hopefully we'll see some of that and more of that coming into the future from legacy brands, but certainly you can look at the list of those emerging brands, newcomer brands. They each have some type of element to that.
Yeah. What I also think is very interesting too is just over the last, I don't know, maybe 5 years is more accurate, but like the channel switches that we keep seeing. We saw a lot of people leaning to direct to consumer. Nike in particular change their strategy. It seems like they're going back more towards wholesale to look at that for a number of reasons. It seems people who were traditional that started to use direct to consumer didn't realize how much it costs to convert and how important it is to have shoes in store windows that people might walk by in terms of branding and recognition and things like that. And I think obviously there's a dance in business to how obviously you can make more on direct to consumer as a sale point. But the business is harder, I think, than people assume, because we have this idea that brick and mortar is dying and e-commerce is going to take half in the next 5 years. And it hasn't happened. It's reverted back to where we were before COVID. People are still going into stores. And obviously with shoes, you want to, put them on and fit and feel, especially if you have kids or something. But in terms of that, when you're talking about branding, it seems like you also have to be very strategic about your opportunities to tell your story digitally, but be able to be in communities where they can walk by and actually see it too. How do you guys observe that over the last couple of years, the interplay between those channels?
It's a great question, and it's certainly something that we work with clients on a lot. I think we have always been a believer in brick and mortar retail and the wholesale channel and its importance as a route to market. I think you're right that a lot of people go into direct to consumer and trying to amp that up, thinking, great, I can capture more margin for every product that I sell, but the operations of it, the fully loaded costs, the actual ability to acquire those customers to your site is not necessarily as easy as it seems up front. And so the cost of doing that is can be more than folks anticipate going into it. I think in a lot of the consumer research that we've done, one, having some wholesale distribution, I think, is key to remain top of mind and relevant to consumers, whether they're shopping for the shoe that you're selling today or not. If they're out and about, they could come across you and it sparks an idea in their mind that maybe that's a need they hadn't thought of yet. The other point that I would note there is in some other research we did, I think people have a tendency to view Gen Z as a digitally native generation that only wants to shop online. And certainly while they are highly engaged online and they spend a lot of time interacting with different digital platforms, they actually showed greater interest in shopping in brick and mortar stores than millennials did. And so I think there is potentially certainly more shopping journeys are started and influenced digitally. I think we can say that hands down. But the thought that brick and mortar is dead, I think, isn't quite showing that to be true in younger generations.
Yeah. I don't know how many years ago this is. I've been with FHIR maybe 12 years. I did this presentation like 7 years ago on this topic about malls in particular. And obviously we know that really good malls are succeeding and really bad malls are failing. And then it's self-evident why that would be. But I reminded people this whole idea of malls, all of them are going to close. The Blues Brothers, when they drove through the mall in their car, that mall was closed. They use that as a stage prop. So malls have been closing since malls have been opening. Let's keep it in perspective. People forget these little anecdotal information things of saying, oh, it's gloom and doom. It's not. People want to get out. People want to go to a nice mall, I'd say, versus a not nice mall. Some of that is depending on whether you have a airbrush t-shirt in the mall or not. I think that's my game, whether it's nice or not. But John, as we wrap up today and look at this, I know folks can go to L.E.K's website and grab the report and definitely connect with John and Laura if you have questions and want to deep dive into it and look at your brand strategy is where these leaders and what they've done to stay up top or to get to near the top, what they've done are very important, I think. But John, kind of final thoughts as we wrap up the convo today.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. There's a lot to think about, obviously, and this is just really scratching the surface.
Yeah.
We do this report because we want to bring greater visibility to areas that we think sometimes get missed in other macro reports, right? Whether it's generation, gender, product category. But again, a lot of the work when we work with clients is around going much deeper into different segments and so on and so forth, because that's where you can really identify where your strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities, risks lie. But look, at the end of the day, I think we've all seen different versions of what the consumer is expecting to spend over the next year or so, and it's fairly muted. We tested that again, and as we do virtually all of our work, and that's a challenge. And then ultimately, that's something that every brand, every retailer, and the footwear apparel space has to deal with. So if you're going to achieve your growth aspirations, you've got to disrupt in some way and grow faster than the market. You just do. If you're not, you're going to grow at or maybe below the market. And for everyone, that's really not acceptable. And so what are the strategies from connecting to the consumer, your brand, and all the way down? As I said, there may be a lot of different pieces along the way in terms of channel strategies. You just pointed out, maybe digital connectivity, et cetera. Those are the things that we're helping clients address every single day. But again, the key is we're in an industry where the brands have got to be disrupted. So if you're a newcomer, you've got to continue to disrupt to take share away from legacy brands. And you've also got to hold on to that position as you be a mainstay. If you're a legacy brand, you've got to be aware of the fact that the ground might have shifted under you. And how are you going to continue to grow, continue to be relevant? And that's absolutely critical, because the underlying just base market growth levels are not going to be that helpful. We've got to be really sharp on our strategies.
Yeah, great point. And again, folks, you can go to L.E.K Consulting, just Google it, and the report is out now. You can grab that. If you want to connect with John or Laura, you can email us and we'll connect you directly, or I'm sure their information's on the report or on LinkedIn. Huge on LinkedIn, love LinkedIn. But definitely this is something that behooves us to take a look at it. We've seen we've mentioned market leaders that have really had emerged, that had a rocket ship just blast off, and it's been really impressive. We've seen some brands over the past 5 years that have emerged and then stalled, and they stalled for very specific reasons, and they made strategic mistakes. And I think looking at this, I think hopefully can help people find some wins and some ways of doing things better. Definitely working with someone like L.E.K can also help to assess your strategies, have a second set of eyes, and have a brain trust to look at what you're doing. John and Laura, thanks for coming on today. We really appreciate it. This is their first time on the Shoe and Show, so we always like newbies. We weren't too rough. I told you we weren't being rough.
Yeah, you're kind. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
We heard your reputation, so I don't know. Next time I'm going to make sure.
Oh, man, we try to be nice people. We try to be nice.
Highness.
Shoeandshow.com is the website. You can go back and see all our episodes. Every single Monday, new episode drops, focusing on the footwear business side. A lot of great podcasts on sneakers and fashion. This is the only show focused on the bottom line for the footwear industry and helping folks find new ideas and new folks to help them do things a little bit better. So we thank you for listening. Until next time, Shoe-In is out.
Shoe-In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.